How will the war in Iran affect the Democratic opposition between the 2028 Democratic primary potential contenders? Now, we don't know officially, but we have a really good idea that former Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom are definitely going to be running in the Democratic primary come 2028. And we know that based on the moves they're making. Harris has a book tour, Gavin Newsom's about to start a book tour, Harris has been making national appearances even as recently as Jesse Jackson's funeral, may he rest, and also Gavin Newsom, tweeting at Trump every chance he gets. Why go after the president if you're a governor, especially on that kind of scale? But of course, they're both competing with the base in order to show that they will be the best contender for 2028. Now, other possible contenders who haven't officially announced, but may be signaling that there's an interest, former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. We also have Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, even potentially Governor of Illinois J.B. Pritzker, Governor of Maryland Wes Moore, but we also have our congressional representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, she has not officially announced, but she has been making moves that show that there is an interest to elevate her stature from the national stage to the international stage. Let's focus this conversation on VP Harris, Governor Newsom, and AOC. Those three tend to be the top contenders that, folks are throwing their names around, but also most likely, to make a real difference in the primary. So, first off, we know that former Vice President Harris will have an uphill battle to win over voters in terms of foreign policy. Now, while she wasn't necessarily the commander-in-chief, seeing how President Biden was at the time of her tenure in office. However, she still was by his side and did not create a stark contrast, separating herself enough from President Biden's foreign policy and administration's moves within the economy and several range of issues. And because of that, we all know that Harris may have nudged, President Biden to be, a little kinder to what was happening in Gaza. There were reports on that. However, at the end of the day, Biden still made the decision to give unyielding loyalty to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, right, regarding all of the billions of dollars, our tax dollars, right, going to, these weapons, destroying families and buildings and the entire terrain of the area. It's been devastating, to say the least. And I can't even explain enough of just how horrible the whole situation is. So to see that former Vice President Kamala Harris, part of how she lost the 2024 election is Trump painted her as some warmonger who was going to start World War III. Now, I would truly believe in my heart of hearts that she would not have brought us into war like that. However, because, she had Liz Cheney, stumping for her on the campaign trail, and because she did promise Liz Cheney a seat in her administration. Now, while that was not verbatim, something that she had ever disclosed in public, we do know from interviews that when asked that question, Harris did not deny it. She shied away, and she gave one of those politician answers of why Liz Cheney would be good in an administration, and seeing how, Harris said, oh, well, I'm open to having Republicans in my administration because I don't see it as a bad thing. So basically saying, yeah, Liz Cheney would have a seat in her administration. Would Harris do that again in 2028? Will she have learned from her mistakes? Time will tell, but as of now, she hasn't come out strong enough against the war. Now, we know that Harris had a public statement sharing that she believes, what Trump is doing is absolutely wrong. He shouldn't have gone to war with Iran, calling him a liar across many different instances, which is a good thing. However, Harris still says, there are other ways to, rein in the Iranian regime. I'm not convinced Harris would necessarily keep us out of world conflict. Now, I'm not saying she would do anything that Trump's been doing between Venezuela and obviously Iran, but I wouldn't be surprised if she does keep the military-industrial complex going. So I do have that concern. I would hope she comes out even stronger, trying to focus on peace and diplomatic relations more than, of course, keeping American interests safe abroad. Now, with Gavin Newsom, He's also in the same boat as Harris. I don't see much of a difference between the two. He also had very similar statement as Harris. But with that said, one thing that does give me hope is that lately, during his interviews, Gavin Newsom has been questioning the American and Israeli alliance, and that is a good thing. We know this because when asked about Israel, Newsom actually referred to it as an apartheid state, and this is good because we know what's going on in Israel, and this isn't necessarily, reasonable or even fair to some degree. So seeing how, he's now shifting with the political winds and seeing how the electorate is fed up with sending billions of taxpayer dollars overseas when we still have issues right here at home. We still haven't managed our economy well. We still haven't kept us, safe from like the measles outbreak in South Carolina. And we still haven't invested in education, or better yet, we are still having a horrible time having families ripped apart, people detained unlawfully, unconstitutionally, and people die in the streets, all because of the Trump regime and their crusade on immigration. So even right now, Newsom at least understands where the winds are headed. And because of that, if he can question the alliance, then that is at least starting to put cracks in the facade, because we need better leadership that will keep us out of these conflicts. Now, last but not least, we know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, while she hasn't necessarily said between New York Senate or the presidency, we know that she's going to run for higher office. But the good thing is that she is the pro-peace candidate. We know that she is not willing to, really escalate tensions, and she's very focused on diplomatic relations. How do we know that? Well, if you got to see her in Munich, she was on a series of panels talking to foreign leaders, diplomats, elected officials, right? And she was able to brilliantly articulate the rise of alt-right authoritarianism around the world thanks to liberal leaders failing on typical neoliberal policy. If Democratic leaders and liberal leaders and Labor Party leaders and, folks on the left around the world, if they can't deliver the basic needs for their electorate or their countries, then there is no way these people are going to elect them again or stick with them. Because when the alt-right throws out an alternative saying, hey, we don't like them, they're not doing this good for you, but we're going to do something better. Because times are so bad right now, they've literally got nothing to lose than choose someone else. And it's awful that they're choosing the alt-right, but how can you blame them? You can't blame them when the people in charge are failing leadership and failing to deliver the basic needs. If you can't put a roof above your head or food on the table, then what's the point? That's basically what we need to survive, let alone keeping each other safe and secure. So because of that, there is a very good chance that, AOC calling it out, the rise of alt-right authoritarianism, that will continue to escalate as time goes on. And now with this war in Iran, that is a very good chance that this will, harm the world economy, especially with oil as prices start to escalate, and especially with the idea that workers are now going to be, with unemployment rising, inflation will eventually start to rise again. And then also here in America, we'll have to raise the interest rates again in order to keep things steady. So things are not good. AOC recognizes this, and her whole message and her movement that she's brought with her to Congress has been really good about pushing hard back on the foreign policy blunders and the mistakes that our leaders have made, both Democratic and Republican. And we need more of this, challenging more of them, because at this point, it really is life or death. So we can't sit on the sidelines, and we must come together, go to a protest, speak out, do what you can to let people know what the situation is. So come 2028, if you really don't like the way things are going, please participate in the Democratic primary. I gotta get the message out now, because even though the general election for 2026 isn't happening yet, what happens in these elections will inform and impact the candidates and the primaries in 2028. Breaking news, we have finally amassed over 100 subscribers on YouTube for Not Suitable for Democracy. Thank you all so much for tuning in, subscribing, and sharing your feedback. It has been so helpful to make this a stronger show. So, like I say every time, if you like what you hear and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, then give us a like and a comment, and I'll do my best to respond.